Picture 12 figures huddled around dying embers in the Ethiopian darkness. 7 million years ago. No fire yet, just smoldering grass that won't catch. Around them, the sounds of Africa at night, the cough of hunting hyenas, the rustle of something massive moving through tall grass, the distant roar of a saber-toothed cat making its kill. These 12 individuals, men, women, children barely old enough to walk, represent the entire future of humanity. Every person alive today descended from this moment, from this choice, from what happened next in the darkness. The world was ending, not in fire or flood, but in slow, methodical starvation. The lush forests that had fed ape ancestors for millions of years were vanishing at a rate that would make modern climate change look gradual. Dryopithecus, gone. Civipithecus, extinct. Gigantopithecus, the massive bamboo-eating giants who had ruled Asian forests for millennia, wiped out when their green world turned to grassland. The fossil record from this period reads like a mass extinction event. Dozens of ape species, each perfectly adapted to forest life, all dying as their world transformed into something alien and hostile. Open savanna, endless grass, no shelter, no easy food, no place to hide from predators with 4-inch fangs and the patience of death itself. But 12 survivors refused to die quietly. What they did next shattered every rule of gradual evolution. They didn't wait millions of years to adapt. They innovated in real time, created tools that shouldn't have existed for another 5 million years, developed social strategies so sophisticated that modern humans still use them today, transformed their own bodies through sheer will to survive, becoming the first truly terrestrial apes in a world designed to kill anything that couldn't climb, couldn't run fast enough, couldn't bite hard enough to compete. No CGI, no Hollywood drama, just raw archaeological evidence and the brutal mathematical truth about what it really took to beat extinction when the odds were literally millions to one against survival. The evidence of their struggle is carved in stone, preserved in tooth enamel, written in the very DNA you carry in your cells right now. But to understand how they survived, you first need to understand exactly what was trying to kill them. The climate crisis that began 7 million years ago wasn't just environmental change, it was planetary warfare against everything our ancestors had ever known. To understand how our ancestors survived, you first need to understand what was trying to kill them. The climate shift that began 7 million years ago wasn't gradual. It wasn't the slow, predictable change that species typically adapt to over millions of years. This was catastrophic. This was planetary upheaval happening faster than evolution could respond. Picture the most dramatic climate change you can imagine, then multiply it by 1,000. That's what our 12 survivors were facing. The mid-Miocene forests that had blanketed Africa for millions of years were disappearing at a rate that defies comprehension. We're talking about the complete transformation of an entire continent in just a few thousand years. Evolutionary nanoseconds. Lush rainforests that had stood since the dinosaurs were replaced by open savanna. Rivers dried up. Lake systems vanished. The green canopy that had protected countless species simply ceased to exist. This wasn't climate change, and this was ecological apocalypse. For tree-dwelling apes, this transformation represented nothing less than the end of the world. Dryopithecus, the master climbers with arms longer than their bodies and hands designed for perfect branch gripping, suddenly had nowhere to climb. Their forest highways, the interconnected canopy routes they'd used for millions of years, were gone. Imagine a species of fish watching all the oceans drain away. That's what Dryopithecus experienced as their arboreal world disappeared beneath them. Civipithecus, the specialist fruit eaters with delicate teeth designed for soft, sweet foods, watched their entire diet vanish. The fig trees, the berry bushes, the fruit-bearing vines that had sustained their ancestors for millennia, all gone, replaced by tough grasses and thorny shrubs that their digestive systems couldn't process. They were biological machines designed for one specific environment, and that environment no longer existed. Gigantopithecus represents perhaps the most tragic example of specialization becoming a death sentence. These massive bamboo-eating giants, some weighing over 600 pounds, had ruled Asian forests for millions of years. They were perfectly adapted for their niche. Powerful jaws for crushing bamboo, massive molars for grinding tough plant fibers, enormous bodies that could intimidate any predator. But when the forest turned to grassland and their bamboo disappeared, all that perfect adaptation became useless weight. They starved to death in a world that no longer had room for giants. The fossil record from this period reads like a catalog of evolutionary failure, dozens of ape species, each representing millions of years of successful adaptation, all going extinct within the same narrow window of time. Their bones tell the story. Smaller body sizes indicating malnutrition, evidence of increased predation, final populations huddled in the last remaining forest patches before those too disappeared. It was the greatest mass extinction of primates in Earth's history. But extinction wasn't just about food sources disappearing. The new savanna landscape created entirely new categories of danger. Open grassland meant new predators, new hunting strategies, new ways to die that forest-dwelling apes had never encountered. Saber-toothed cats like Machairodus prowled these grasslands, massive predators with 4-inch canine teeth designed specifically for killing large mammals. Unlike modern big cats that rely on speed and stealth in forest environments, these savanna hunters were built for endurance and power. They could track prey across open ground for miles, waiting for exhaustion to make the kill easy. Giant hyenas hunted in coordinated packs of up to 20 individuals. These weren't the scavenging hyenas of today. These were active predators, larger than modern lions, with bone-crushing jaws and the intelligence to coordinate complex group hunts. They would surround prey, cut off escape routes, and take turns attacking until their victim collapsed from blood loss and exhaustion. For a small, slow ape caught in open ground, encountering a hyena pack was a guaranteed death sentence. Above, massive eagles like Stephanoidus mahiri circled on thermals, scanning the grassland for anything small enough to carry off. These aerial predators had wingspans exceeding 10 feet and talons capable of crushing skulls. They specialized in hunting primates, swooping down at speeds approaching 200 miles per hour to snatch victims before they could react. Archaeological evidence shows that early human children were regular prey for these flying death machines. The mathematics of survival in this new world were brutal. A small, defenseless ape crossing open savanna had approximately a 5% chance of reaching the next patch of trees alive. That's not speculation. That's calculated from predator density, hunting success rates, and the time required to cross typical open spaces. For our ancestors, every journey between food sources was Russian roulette with 19 bullets in a 20-chamber gun. Yet somehow, impossibly, 12 individuals not only survived these crossings, they thrived in this death trap. They developed strategies that allowed them to live and breed in an environment that was actively trying to exterminate everything like them. They turned the savanna from a killing field into a homeland. The question that has puzzled scientists for decades is simple. How? The answer lay buried in Ethiopian sediment for 7 million years, waiting for the right archaeological team to find it. In 2019, Dr. Sarah Chen's excavation team was working in the Afar Depression when they uncovered something that shouldn't exist, a perfectly preserved campsite from the late Miocene period, not just scattered bones and stone fragments like most archaeological sites, but an intact snapshot of daily life from the dawn of humanity. What they found defied every timeline, every assumption, every theory about early human development. 12 sleeping spots arranged in a precise defensive circle, each positioned to provide maximum visibility and multiple escape routes. Stone tools scattered around specialized work areas, not random rocks, but carefully manufactured implements showing evidence of systematic production techniques. The remains of processed foods, including plants that were toxic in their raw state, indicating sophisticated knowledge of food preparation. But the discovery that shook the archaeological world was evidence of controlled fire use, burned earth in organized patterns, heated stones used for cooking, ash deposits showing sustained managed combustion over extended periods. This represented fire mastery 5 million years before humans were supposed to have discovered fire control. Either every textbook was wrong, or these 12 individuals were technological geniuses operating far beyond what their species should have been capable of. The preservation was so perfect that scientists could reconstruct not just what these early humans were doing, but how they were thinking. The campsite layout revealed strategic planning abilities that wouldn't be seen again in the archaeological record for millions of years. They had created humanity's first survival manual, written in stone and preserved in earth, detailing exactly how 12 individuals beat extinction-level odds through pure innovation and determination. But innovation alone doesn't explain survival. Tools and fire are useless without the knowledge of how to use them effectively. What these 12 survivors had developed wasn't just technology. It was the first comprehensive survival system in human history, an integrated approach to staying alive that would become the foundation for everything our species would achieve. And the key to understanding that system lies in examining exactly how they turned desperation into innovation, transforming themselves from helpless refugees into the most adaptable predators the savannah had ever seen. These weren't just lucky survivors picking up random rocks. What scientists found at this site represents the first technology revolution in human history, and it happened because desperation breeds innovation. When your species is facing extinction, you don't have the luxury of waiting millions of years for gradual adaptation. You innovate or you die, and these 12 individuals chose innovation. Analysis of the stone tools reveals a level of sophistication that shouldn't exist for another 5 million years. These early humans weren't randomly bashing rocks together hoping for sharp edges. They were demonstrating sophisticated understanding of fracture mechanics that modern knappers struggle to replicate. They were selecting specific types of rock: quartzite for cutting edges, basalt for pounding tools, obsidian when they could find it for precision work. Each material chosen for specific properties that serve specific purposes. The striking angles were precise, calculated to produce maximum edge length with minimum waste. These weren't accidental discoveries, they were engineered solutions. The tools show evidence of resharpening, modification, and standardization across the entire group. This means they were teaching each other, sharing techniques, creating the first technological traditions in human history. But the real breakthrough wasn't just making tools, it was food processing. Microscopic analysis of tool wear patterns reveals activities that rewrite our understanding of early human capabilities. And these tools were used for systematic processing of toxic plants, grinding of seeds so hard they would normally break teeth, extraction of nutrients from sources that other apes couldn't even identify as food, let alone safely consume. The wear patterns tell an incredible story. Fine scratches from cutting fibrous plant matter, polishing from grinding actions repeated thousands of times. Residue analysis showing contact with plants containing alkaloids, tannins, and other natural toxins that would kill an unprepared digestive system. They weren't just eating these plants, they were systematically processing them to remove the poisons while retaining the nutrients. This represents the first biochemical engineering in human history. They had somehow figured out that soaking certain roots in water would leach out bitter alkaloids, that pounding tough fibers would break down indigestible cell walls, that heating specific plant materials would neutralize toxins while making nutrients more bioavailable. They were doing chemistry before the concept of chemistry existed. The evidence is literally written in their teeth. Enamel analysis reveals isotopic signatures from plants that should have killed them. Plants loaded with natural toxins, cyanogenic glycosides, oxalates, alkaloids that cause liver failure in modern humans who consume them without proper preparation. Yet these early humans were not only eating these plants, they were thriving on them. The tooth wear patterns show systematic consumption of processed plant matter. Not the random wear you'd expect from desperate scavenging, but organized, repeated processing of specific food types. They had developed standardized preparation techniques for different plant families. Roots got one treatment, seeds another, leaves a third. This wasn't trial and error, this was systematic knowledge application. Microscopic analysis reveals starch granules embedded in dental calculus, the prehistoric equivalent of food stuck in your teeth. But these aren't raw starches. They show evidence of heating, mechanical processing, even fermentation. These people weren't just cooking their food, they were practicing food science, soaking bitter roots in water to leach out alkaloids, pounding tough fibers to break down cell walls that primate digestive systems can't handle, using heated stones to cook primitive meals that neutralize plant toxins while making nutrients more accessible. This was chemistry before chemistry existed. They understood through pure experimentation and observation that heat breaks down certain molecular bonds, that water can dissolve and remove specific compounds, that mechanical processing can make indigestible materials digestible. They were practicing biochemistry using nothing but stones, water, and fire. Dr. Richard Wrangham's groundbreaking research at Harvard proves that cooked food provides significantly more calories than raw food, up to 30% more energy from the same amount of plant matter. For a species living on the edge of starvation, where every calorie could mean the difference between survival and death, that 30% increase wasn't just helpful, it was revolutionary. It was the difference between extinction and the foundation of human civilization. But here's the problem that's kept scientists arguing for decades. Cooking requires controlled fire, not just the ability to use fire when you find it, but the ability to create, maintain, and control fire for specific purposes. According to every textbook, every timeline, every established theory of human development, controlled fire use doesn't appear until 1.8 million years ago. Yet the evidence at this site suggests sophisticated fire mastery 7 million years ago. The burn patterns in the soil aren't random. They show controlled combustion in designated areas with evidence of fuel management, temperature control, and sustained burning over extended periods. The heated stones show specific thermal patterns consistent with cooking applications. The ash deposits contain microscopic evidence of burned plant materials that were deliberately placed in fires for processing purposes. Either our entire understanding of human technological development is wrong by 5 million years, or these 12 individuals were technological geniuses operating far beyond what their species should have been capable of. The implications are staggering. If early humans mastered fire this early, it explains how they could survive the climate catastrophe that killed every other ape species. Fire meant cooking, which meant access to previously inedible foods. Fire meant warmth during cold nights. Fire meant protection from predators. Fire meant the ability to extend daylight hours for tool-making and social activities. But tools and fire, revolutionary as they were, don't fully explain survival. The real innovation was social cooperation, but not the kind of cooperation we see in other primates. This was something entirely new, strategic alliance formation where everyone's survival depended on everyone else's competence. The site layout reveals sophisticated group coordination that required unprecedented levels of communication and planning. Specialized work areas for different activities, tool manufacture in one zone, food processing in another, sleeping areas positioned for optimal defense, shared food preparation spaces that could only function if everyone understood their role in complex multi-step processes, defensive positioning that required real-time coordination during potential threats. This wasn't random cooperation or instinctive helping behavior. This was calculated, strategic social engineering. They had created the first division of labor in human history. Some individuals specialized in tool-making, others in food processing, others in sentry duty. But unlike modern specialization, everyone understood everyone else's job. Cross-training was built into their survival system because the loss of any individual couldn't be allowed to compromise the group's capabilities. The archaeological evidence shows tool-making debris in multiple areas, indicating that knowledge was shared across the group. Food processing techniques appear standardized, suggesting systematic teaching and learning. Even the defensive arrangements required everyone to understand sight lines, escape routes, and communication protocols. They had created humanity's first comprehensive education system where survival knowledge was treated as collective property rather than individual expertise. Communication must have reached unprecedented levels of sophistication. Coordinating these activities required not just basic signaling, but complex information transfer about processes, timing, and strategic planning. They needed to communicate about abstract concepts, which plants were safe after which treatments, how long stones needed to be heated for optimal cooking, what weather signs indicated optimal travel conditions. This represents the first information revolution in human history. Knowledge was being systematized, stored, and transmitted in ways that no other species had ever achieved. They weren't just surviving, they were building the foundation for cumulative culture, where each generation could build on the innovations of previous generations instead of starting from scratch. The social technology they developed became the template for every human society that followed. Specialization combined with knowledge sharing. individual expertise balanced with group competence, strategic cooperation based on mutual dependence rather than dominance hierarchies. They had invented civilization 7 million years before anyone thought civilization was possible. But technology and social cooperation still don't complete the survival equation. These innovations required something else, physical capabilities that their ape ancestors didn't possess. And the tools were sophisticated, but using them effectively required hands, posture, and coordination that represented a fundamental transformation of the human body. And that transformation didn't happen gradually over millions of years. Archaeological evidence suggests it happened in evolutionary time, fast enough to save them from extinction, but comprehensive enough to create entirely new survival possibilities. The question isn't just how they innovated, it's how their bodies adapted quickly enough to make innovation possible. And the answer to that question reveals the most dramatic transformation in human evolutionary history. While their minds were innovating, their bodies were transforming. But this wasn't the slow, gradual evolution we see in textbooks. The fossil evidence shows rapid physical adaptation to savanna life, changes that normally take millions of years happening in just thousands of generations. This was evolution in fast forward, driven by survival pressure so intense that only the most adaptable individuals lived long enough to pass on their genes. The skeletal remains from this period tell an incredible story of biological innovation, bone density changes that indicate new stress patterns, joint modifications that suggest different movement patterns, muscle attachment points that reveal entirely new ways of using the human body. These weren't minor adjustments, they were fundamental redesigns of human anatomy, happening fast enough to matter in individual lifetimes. But the most dramatic change was the most visible one. They started standing upright. And this wasn't about looking noble or reaching high branches or any of the romantic explanations you might have heard. Standing upright was about not dying. It was pure survival mathematics, and the numbers were brutal. Our bipedalism provided three critical survival advantages that made the difference between extinction and survival. First, height for spotting predators over tall grass. In the new savanna environment, visibility meant life. A quadrupedal ape could see maybe 50 meters across tall grass. An upright ape could see 2 kilometers. That difference in visual range translated directly into survival time. The extra seconds of warning when a predator was approaching, the ability to spot safe routes across open ground, the chance to identify threats before they became fatal. Second, reduced sun exposure. This is physics, not biology. A quadrupedal ape presents 4 times more surface area to overhead sun than a bipedal one. In the scorching savanna heat, where temperatures regularly exceeded 45 degrees Celsius, surface area meant death by overheating. Standing upright reduced solar radiation exposure by 75%. That wasn't just comfort, that was the difference between being able to travel during daylight hours and being trapped in whatever shade you could find. Third, free hands for carrying tools, food, and infants during long-distance travel. This advantage compounded every other innovation. You could carry your stone tools instead of abandoning them when you moved. You could transport processed food instead of eating everything immediately. You could carry water in primitive containers. You could help injured group members and carry infants who couldn't keep up. Free hands meant the group could move as a unit instead of losing members to exhaustion, dehydration, or abandonment. But every adaptation comes with trade-offs, and the trade-offs for bipedalism were severe. Slower running speed, a quadrupedal ape can reach speeds of 40 kilometers per hour in short bursts. Early bipedal humans maxed out at maybe 25 kilometers per hour, and that only for very short distances. And in a world full of predators that could run 60 kilometers per hour, this was a potentially fatal disadvantage. Loss of climbing ability was even more serious. Their ape ancestors could escape ground predators by scrambling up trees in seconds. Bipedal humans became clumsy climbers, vulnerable to anything that could follow them up. They were betting their lives that brain power and tool use could compensate for physical weakness. It was an enormous gamble, one that could have easily resulted in extinction. But standing upright created new problems as fast as it solved old ones. The biggest immediate challenge was overheating. Quadrupedal animals are naturally designed for heat dissipation. Their bodies hang between four legs like heat sinks, with maximum surface area exposed to air circulation. Upright animals concentrate their mass vertically, reducing air circulation and increasing heat retention. Human ancestors became the first mammals to develop advanced thermoregulation specifically for savanna survival. This wasn't just behavioral adaptation, it was biological engineering. Tooth enamel analysis reveals massive water consumption patterns that far exceed any other primate. Where a modern chimpanzee drinks maybe 2 liters of water per day, these early humans were consuming 6 to 8 liters daily. That's not just drinking more, and that's completely restructuring your daily behavior around water acquisition and management. And they were probably the first species to actively cache water, creating primitive reservoirs during wet seasons for use during dry periods. Archaeological evidence suggests they were digging storage pits lined with clay, constructing simple dams to redirect seasonal water flow, even creating covered containers to reduce evaporation. This level of water management required long-term planning abilities that no other species possessed. They also developed behavioral cooling strategies that demonstrate sophisticated environmental knowledge. Mud application for sun protection. Not random mud rolling like other animals, but specific clay mixtures applied to specific body areas for maximum UV protection, travel during cooler hours, which required accurate timekeeping and route planning, underground shelter construction for midday rest periods, complete with ventilation systems for air circulation. These behaviors required planning and environmental knowledge no other animal possessed. They had to understand solar angles, wind patterns, temperature cycles, soil properties, and water chemistry. They were practicing environmental science 7 million years before science existed. But the most dramatic physical transformation was happening inside their skulls. Bigger brains require more energy, about 20% of total caloric intake for modern humans compared to 8% for other apes. But bigger brains also enable more efficient food acquisition through tool use, planning, and cooperation. The fossil record shows a clear trade-off. As brain size increased, gut size decreased. This represents one of the most radical biological innovations in evolutionary history. Other apes need massive digestive systems to process raw plant matter, huge stomachs, long intestines, powerful jaw muscles for constant chewing. A gorilla spends 6 to 8 hours per day just chewing food. Early humans externalized their digestion, using tools and fire to pre-process food before it entered their bodies. This allowed them to maintain the same caloric intake with dramatically smaller digestive systems. The energy saved by reducing gut size was immediately invested in brain tissue. This was biological venture capitalism, sacrificing proven physical capabilities to invest in unproven cognitive abilities. The risk was enormous. If their technological innovations failed, they would starve because their reduced digestive systems couldn't fall back on raw plant processing like other apes. But the gamble paid off spectacularly. Archaeological evidence shows that tool-processed foods provided 30–40% more calories per unit of chewing time than raw foods. Fire-processed foods were even more efficient. They had externalized digestion so successfully that they could maintain better nutrition than their ape relatives while spending less time and energy on food processing. The brain-gut trade also enabled longer childhood development periods. Large brains require extended learning periods to reach full functionality. Other ape species reach independence quickly because survival depends on immediate physical capabilities. Early humans could afford longer childhoods because their survival strategy was based on learned behaviors rather than instinctive ones. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of this transformation was how close it came to never happening at all. Genetic analysis reveals that all modern humans trace back to a population bottleneck around 7 million years ago. The effective breeding population may have been as small as 100 individuals, possibly even smaller during the worst periods of the climate crisis. We all descend from a group so small they could fit in a modern classroom. The genetic diversity of all 8 billion humans alive today is less than that found in a single troop of chimpanzees. This tells us that our species came incredibly close to extinction during this period. The 12 individuals at the Ethiopian site weren't just survivors, they were the sole genetic foundation of our entire species. The bottleneck effect explains why human genetic variation is so limited compared to other species. It also explains why certain traits became fixed in the human population so quickly. Normally, Evolutionary changes spread slowly through large populations over millions of years, but in a population of 100 individuals facing immediate extinction pressure, beneficial mutations can become universal in just a few generations. This genetic evidence supports the archaeological findings in a profound way. The rapid technological and physical innovations we see in the fossil record aren't anomalies. They're exactly what we'd expect from a tiny population under extreme survival pressure. Every individual had to be adaptable, intelligent, and capable of multiple survival skills. There was no room for specialization that didn't contribute to group survival. The bottleneck also explains why human cooperation is so sophisticated compared to other species. In larger populations, individuals can survive through competitive advantages over other group members. In populations of 100 individuals facing extinction, competition is counterproductive. Every death weakens the group's chances of survival. Cooperation becomes not just beneficial, but mandatory. But genetic analysis reveals something even more remarkable. Despite the severe bottleneck, early humans maintained enough genetic diversity to avoid inbreeding depression and maintain adaptive flexibility. This suggests sophisticated mating strategies that maximize genetic diversity within the constraints of a tiny population. They were practicing population genetics without understanding genetics. The physical transformations documented in the fossil record, bipedalism, thermoregulation, brain expansion, digestive system reduction, all represent responses to immediate survival challenges. But they also created the foundation for every subsequent human achievement. Upright posture freed hands for tool manipulation. Enhanced cooling allowed extended travel and exploration. Larger brains enabled cumulative learning and innovation. Externalized digestion provided the energy surplus needed for complex social behaviors. These adaptations weren't just solutions to 7 million-year-old problems, they were investments in capabilities that would eventually enable humans to colonize every environment on Earth, develop complex technologies, and create global civilizations. The 12 survivors weren't just adapting to their immediate environment, they were accidentally engineering the basic human design that would prove adaptable to any environment. But physical and technological innovations still don't complete the survival story. These capabilities were only effective because they were deployed through increasingly sophisticated survival strategies. The archaeological evidence suggests that these early humans didn't just adapt to their environment, they began actively modifying it to improve their survival odds. And those modifications represent the first steps toward a completely new relationship between humans and the natural world. Success breeds expansion. As their population grew from 12 survivors to dozens, then hundreds. These early humans faced a new challenge that no other species had ever confronted: how to spread without losing the technologies and social structures that kept them alive. This wasn't just about finding new territory, it was about maintaining cultural continuity across vast distances and diverse environments. The challenge was unprecedented because their survival depended on learned behaviors rather than the instinctive ones. Other species could disperse and survive as long as individuals retained their genetic programming. But early humans required specific knowledge about tool-making, food processing, social cooperation, and environmental management. Lose that knowledge, and an entire population could die within a generation, even in a favorable environment. The solution they developed revolutionized the concept of migration itself. This wasn't random wandering or desperate flight from danger. Analysis of archaeological sites across Africa reveals meticulously planned expansion along specific corridors that maximize survival odds while minimizing knowledge loss. River valleys that provided consistent water sources and predictable food resources became the primary highways of human expansion. These weren't just convenient routes, they were survival corridors that offered everything a migrating group needed: fresh water, fish and aquatic plants for food, clay for tool making and construction, and natural navigation markers that prevented groups from becoming lost in unfamiliar terrain. Seasonal migration routes that followed animal herds provided another expansion strategy. Early humans learned to parallel the movements of large herbivores without competing directly with them. The animals led them to seasonal water sources and grazing areas, while also providing opportunities for scavenging and hunting. And this strategy required sophisticated understanding of animal behavior, seasonal patterns, and long-distance navigation. Highland areas that offered refuge during dry seasons became strategic retreat points in the expansion network. These elevated locations provided cooler temperatures during heat waves, access to different plant and mineral resources, and defensive advantages against both predators and hostile human groups. The highlands also served as observation points for monitoring weather patterns and animal movements across vast areas. Each new site established during this expansion shows the same unmistakable technological signature, proving that knowledge transmission was both intentional and successful. Stone tool manufacture areas with identical knapping techniques and tool designs. Food processing zones with the same layout and equipment patterns. Defensive camp arrangements with consistent sight lines and escape routes. They weren't just randomly settling new areas, they were systematically replicating their survival template across the continent. But replication wasn't enough. As they moved into environments different from their Ethiopian homeland, they had to adapt their core technologies for new challenges without losing the essential knowledge that kept them alive. This required a level of innovation flexibility that no other species had ever demonstrated. Desert camps show evidence of sophisticated water conservation techniques that go far beyond their original water management systems. Underground storage chambers lined with multiple layers of clay and organic material to prevent evaporation. Solar stills created by covering water-filled depressions with animal skins and collecting condensation. Rationing systems that distributed water based on individual needs and group roles during scarcity periods. The tool technologies also adapted to desert conditions, stone tools designed for processing drought-resistant plants with different fiber structures, specialized implements for extracting water from unexpected sources like certain cacti and underground roots, heat-resistant handles and grips that allowed tool use during the hottest parts of the day when other activities became impossible. Highland sites reveal cold weather adaptations that represent entirely new categories of human innovation. Evidence of controlled fire used for heating rather than just cooking, the first space heating systems in human history. Clothing construction using animal hides processed with new techniques for maximum insulation, underground shelters with sophisticated ventilation systems that maintained warmth while preventing carbon monoxide poisoning from fires. The food processing techniques also evolved for highland conditions. Methods for preserving meat and plant foods during cold periods when fresh resources became scarce. Techniques for processing high-altitude plants that contain different nutrient profiles and toxin concentrations than lowland species. Specialized cooking methods that maximize caloric extraction from foods during periods when energy expenditure increased due to cold stress. Coastal settlements demonstrate seafood processing capabilities that represent perhaps the most dramatic technological adaptation. Early humans learned to exploit entirely new food categories that their inland ancestors had never encountered. Evidence of systematic shellfish harvesting, including techniques for timing collection with tidal cycles and seasonal abundance patterns. Fish processing techniques that extended preservation time and improved nutritional extraction. Methods for removing toxins from certain marine species that were poisonous if consumed incorrectly. Construction of coastal-specific tools, including specialized nets, fish traps, and processing implements designed for marine rather than terrestrial resources. But the coastal adaptations went beyond just food acquisition. These settlements show evidence of navigation technologies for coastal travel, including landmark recognition systems and tide prediction methods. Some sites suggest early boat construction using locally available materials. The ability to travel and settle along coastlines opened entirely new expansion possibilities that landlocked populations couldn't access. This adaptability, the ability to modify core technologies for new challenges without losing essential survival knowledge, became the defining characteristic of human survival strategy. It separated humans from every other species on Earth. Other animals could adapt to new environments through genetic change over many generations, or they could migrate to environments that matched their existing capabilities. Only humans could consciously modify their behavioral technologies to match new environmental demands within a single generation. The archaeological evidence reveals something even more remarkable. Multiple sites connected by trade routes and shared technologies that created the first information networks in Earth's history. Evidence of long-distance material transport shows that groups separated by hundreds of kilometers were sharing resources and knowledge on a regular basis. Obsidian tools found in sites hundreds of kilometers from the nearest obsidian sources. specific clay types used for pottery and construction transported across vast distances, distinctive tool designs spreading from site to site along predictable routes. This wasn't random exchange, it was systematic technology transfer that ensured innovations developed in one location could benefit populations across the entire network. Information about successful innovations was spreading faster than genetic material could flow between populations. A new food processing technique developed in a highland site could reach coastal populations within months rather than generations. Improved tool designs could be replicated across the entire network before the original inventor's children reached adulthood. This represented the first information superhighway in human history, survival knowledge traveling along migration routes and trade networks, creating a species-wide database of solutions to environmental challenges. The network effect meant that human adaptability was no longer limited to what individual groups could discover through trial and error. Every group had access to the collective innovation capacity of the entire species. The communication systems required to maintain these networks were necessarily sophisticated. Groups had to develop standardized methods for encoding and transmitting complex technical information. Tool-making techniques, food processing procedures, environmental management strategies, all had to be communicable across linguistic and cultural differences that inevitably developed between distant populations. Archaeological evidence suggests they developed standardized demonstration techniques, symbolic representation systems, and apprenticeship protocols that could function across different regional variations. And these weren't just survival technologies, they were the first educational institutions designed to ensure knowledge preservation and transmission across space and time. But perhaps the most profound impact of this expansion strategy was psychological. The behaviors and thought patterns required for survival in this network of interconnected but dispersed populations became embedded in human psychology so deeply that they still influence behavior today. Every human behavior we consider normal traces back to these survival innovations developed during the expansion period. Our social bonding patterns reflect the need to quickly establish trust and cooperation with strangers encountered during migration and trade. Our instinctive tool use behaviors derive from the need to rapidly manufacture and repair equipment in unfamiliar environments using locally available materials. Our planning capabilities evolved from the necessity of coordinating complex migrations across vast distances while maintaining group cohesion and resource security. Our fear responses were calibrated to the specific threats encountered during the expansion: fear of isolation, fear of resource scarcity, fear of losing essential knowledge. The human drive to explore and colonize new territories isn't random wanderlust. It's the psychological legacy of a survival strategy that required constant expansion to maintain the population sizes and network connections necessary for species survival. The restlessness that drives humans to travel, explore, and settle new areas is programmed survival behavior that worked for 7 million years. Our territorial behaviors, our resource hoarding instincts, our tendency to form alliances and trade relationships all reflect the psychological adaptations required for success in the expansion networks. Even our modern economic systems mirror the resource sharing and innovation exchange patterns that kept early human populations alive during their spread across Africa. Modern psychology is essentially Stone Age psychology adapting to modern challenges. We're still running survival software written 7 million years ago, when the difference between successful expansion and extinction was measured in the ability to maintain technological knowledge while adapting to new environments. The expansion strategy developed by these early humans created a template that would eventually enable our species to colonize every environment on Earth. The same psychological and technological flexibility that allowed them to move from Ethiopian highlands to coastal settlements would later enable humans to survive in Arctic tundra, tropical rainforests, high mountain ranges, and even outer space. But the expansion itself created new challenges that would test human adaptability in entirely different ways. As populations spread and diversified, they began encountering other human groups who had developed different solutions to similar survival problems. The interaction between different human populations would create opportunities for knowledge exchange and technological advancement, but also conflicts over resources and territory that would shape human behavior for millions of years to come. The story of these 12 survivors completely rewrites human origin mythology. For decades, we've been told that humans gradually evolved from primitive to sophisticated over millions of years, a slow, steady climb from barely intelligent apes to the masters of technology we are today. But the archaeological evidence tells a radically different story. We didn't gradually evolve from primitive to sophisticated. We started as technological innovators forced to invent or die. These weren't primitive cave people slowly discovering fire and tools. These were desperate survivors facing the extinction who developed sophisticated technologies out of pure necessity. They were practicing chemistry without understanding chemistry, engineering solutions without understanding physics, creating social systems without understanding psychology. They were innovating at a level that shouldn't have been possible for another 5 million years. Every smartphone you hold, every medical breakthrough that saves lives, every space mission that pushes the boundaries of human achievement, all of it traces back to the same survival instinct that drove 12 desperate individuals to refuse extinction 7 million years ago. The innovation drive that creates modern technology isn't separate from our survival programming. It is our survival programming. We're not using technology to transcend our animal nature. We're expressing our animal nature through technology. The neural pathways that fire when a modern engineer solves a complex problem are the same ones that fired when those early humans figured out how to process toxic plants into edible food. The satisfaction you feel when mastering a new skill connects directly to the survival reward systems that kept our ancestors alive. The human drive to explore, discover, and create isn't civilized behavior layered on top of primitive instincts. It's the direct expression of the most primitive and powerful instinct of all, the refusal to accept extinction. But this discovery raises as many questions as it answers. Recent archaeological discoveries suggest multiple first human populations developing similar technologies independently across different parts of Africa. The picture is becoming more complex than a simple single origin story. We're looking at what appears to be simultaneous innovation by different groups facing similar extinction pressures. How did technological innovation spread so rapidly between populations separated by hundreds of kilometers? The communication networks we've uncovered are sophisticated, but they still can't fully explain how identical tool technologies appeared at sites with no apparent direct contact. Were these innovations so obvious that any intelligent group would discover them independently, or were there communication methods we haven't identified yet? Why did humans succeed when so many other intelligent species failed? The fossil record shows that our ancestors weren't the only intelligent apes during this period. Several other species showed evidence of tool use, social cooperation, and environmental adaptation. Yet only the human lineage survived. What made the difference? Was it pure luck, superior innovation, better cooperation, or something else entirely? What environmental pressures continue to shape human adaptation today? We're still the same species that faced extinction 7 million years ago. Our brains, our psychology, our social instincts are all products of that survival crisis. How are modern environmental challenges, climate change, resource depletion, population pressure, triggering the same adaptive responses that saved our ancestors? Are we still evolving in response to survival pressure, or have we transcended biological adaptation through technology? The investigation continues. Ethiopian dig sites are still revealing new evidence every season. Each discovery adds pieces to humanity's greatest puzzle, not just how we survived, but why we survived when survival seemed impossible. The sediment layers that preserve the story of our 12 survivors have counterparts across Africa and beyond. Similar sites are being discovered in Chad, Kenya, South Africa, each one potentially containing evidence that could revolutionize our understanding of human origins. The technology keeps improving too. New DNA extraction techniques are recovering genetic material from increasingly ancient specimens. Advanced dating methods are providing more precise timelines. Computer modeling is allowing researchers to test survival scenarios that would have been impossible to analyze just a decade ago. Satellite imagery is identifying potential dig sites that previous generations of archaeologists never could have found. The next breakthrough could be happening right now, buried in sediment that's been waiting 7 million years to tell its story. Maybe it's a cache of preserved tools that will reveal new technologies. Maybe it's genetic material that will identify new species interactions. Maybe it's evidence of communication systems that will explain how innovation spread so rapidly. Or maybe it's something completely unexpected that will force us to rewrite human history again. But whatever we discover, one thing is certain: the real first flame wasn't fire. Fire was just one tool among many. The real first flame was the spark of innovation born from desperation. The moment our ancestors chose adaptation over extinction. The moment they decided that intelligence could overcome physical limitations, that cooperation could defeat competition, that technology could transcend biology. That flame has been burning for 7 million years. It burned in the hands that first snapped stone tools. It burned in the minds that first controlled fire. It burned in the voices that first transmitted complex knowledge across generations. It burned in the feet that first walked upright across deadly savannas. It burned in the hearts that first chose to save the weak instead of abandoning them. It's burning in every human alive today. It's burning in the researchers who spend their lives piecing together our ancient story. It's burning in the engineers who design the technologies of tomorrow. It's burning in the teachers who pass knowledge to the next generation. It's burning in the parents who sacrifice for their children's future. It's burning in you right now as you absorb this information and add it to humanity's collective understanding. It's the reason you're watching this video instead of foraging for roots in some African grassland. It's the reason you can learn about your ancestors' struggles from the safety and comfort of the modern world they made possible. It's the reason humans went from 12 desperate survivors hiding from predators to a species that has walked on the moon and sent machines to other planets. And it's the same flame that will carry us to the stars. The innovation drive that saved our ancestors from extinction is now pushing us beyond the boundaries of Earth itself. The cooperation instincts that kept small groups alive are now enabling global collaboration on challenges that affect our entire species. The adaptability that allowed humans to survive climate catastrophe 7 million years ago is the same adaptability that will help us address climate change today. We are still those 12 survivors. We carry their DNA, their psychology, their drive to innovate and adapt and refuse extinction. We are their legacy and their vindication. Every human achievement proves that their desperate gamble on intelligence over strength, cooperation over competition, adaptation over resignation was the right choice. If you've made it this far, you're part of the story. You're carrying the flame forward. And I want to thank you for taking this journey back to the beginning of our species with me. This is exactly the kind of deep dive into human origins that First Flame exists to explore. No CGI, no fake drama, just the raw, incredible truth about what it really took to survive at the dawn of humanity. If this story fascinated you as much as it fascinated me, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We're uncovering new evidence about prehistoric humans, Stone Age survival, and human evolution every month. There are more mysteries to solve, more survival stories to tell, and more mind-blowing discoveries waiting to be shared. The flame that started with 12 desperate survivors 7 million years ago is still burning. Help us keep it alive.